And those woulda, shoulda, couldas will actually turn into, and you'll hear it, it'll turn into, well, had I just done this, this wouldn't have happened. Had I just done something different, this could have all been prevented. And the other interesting thing that I'm going to throw out, and then I'll turn it over to the panelists too to jump in definitionally, is that moral distress occurs and moral injury despite being able to shift liability onto a supervisor or higher authority. The distress isn't alleviated just because your supervisor made the call or the chief made the policy or the whatever. It's not, we can't put it on somebody else because most of these things are deeply attached to one's internal morals and integrity, which is personal and then has the, you know, propensity to really deeply stay with you. You have anything to add to that, Nick?
I think you hit on a lot of the points and really differentiated, because ultimately we see a lot of these terms get thrown around, whether it is cumulative trauma, whether it's burnout, compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, and really we need that delineation of what moral injury is, because moral injury and burnout differ from each other. There's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of overlap. I know we're going to talk a little bit, I'll talk a little bit about you know, some of the symptoms that we'll see, and I know you're going to get into the differentiation between burnout and compassion fatigue in a little bit, but I think it's very important for the audience to know that moral injury is not something that can be readily taken care of. Like, and I love how you said that it's not just something you can throw on your boss or throw on a department. This is something that has a wide range. It kind of is all encompassing, and we're looking at really changing one's worldview and how they view things, not only of themselves but the world itself. So
yeah, and examples might include, just to tie it up, to give examples, you know, mistakes that are made in the line of duty that ultimately result in death. So an error actually occurred. The individual engaged in something that was an error that could have been done differently, and it resulted in death or injury. Sometimes it's as simple as, and simple, I'll use air quotes for that, but even survivor's guilt. That person that you called in to take that shift for you at the last minute ends up in a shooting. And that was your shift. That would have been your call had you have been there. And now this person is no longer present, or they're severely injured. That can fall into the moral injury category. Or even switching from, I think of all the folks that I've worked with throughout my 20+ years of working with various responder groups and folks, switching from that, being put in a situation where you have to potentially take someone's life, and then after you engage in that, you then have to switch modes and go into life-saving techniques. You've got to then switch modes and go save the life of someone who just tried to kill you. That can be morally injurious. Stepping over victims in active shooter scenarios. You know, I hate to say, but in, you know, Colorado, we spoke earlier offline about Colorado and all of the active shooter situations that have happened, and they're happening all over the country. And in an active shooter scenario, training dictates that you will step over victims. You will continue to move until you can neutralize the active shooter. And that oftentimes means leaving people behind or stepping over people who are injured, who otherwise are begging for you to help them and save them. That can be incredibly difficult.